done for this particular session. My name is Petra Orloff. I run a company called Beloved. I'm going to come around with some handouts. For you guys. I spent 12 years teaching at a university in Detroit, called Wayne State University, teaching cultural studies as well as literature. And because of budget cuts to fund humanities and the lack of tenure track positions, I ended up leaving Wayne and becoming a freelance writer. One of the things that I wrote quite a bit in my freelance career was obituaries. And when my father passed in 2004, I wrote a very successful obituary for him that kind of launched the company. So that's what we do. We write obituaries and eulogies. We work with funeral directors, pre-named insurance companies, and the like. And they're all customized and personal. They tend to be more like creative life stories than anything else. Am I getting you more here? All right. Excellent. So, I'm going to sit up here at the front for a few minutes. There's a few things that I'd like to do before we get started in earnest with the discussion. The first is, I would like to go around the room, and I would like all of you to introduce yourselves and then tell me something very interesting about you. All right, so perhaps we can start with my friend Giovanni.
Hello, my name is Giovanni Baca. I'm 25, and I don't know, interesting thing, for my 21st birthday, I took myself on a trip to Europe, just myself, and I went to Amsterdam and Paris and just kind of went all around Italy, and that was like the best time of my life, and I love it.
I'm Jocelyn. Yeah, what do I get? It's interesting. I don't know. This is my little Ansel. That's all I got.
You know, you have to have some.
Might have to come back to me.
Nope, right now.
Ansel, what's interesting? We got a little black kitten for Halloween. Big Salem.
Oh, that's wonderful. All right, you, sir.
My name is Sam Kinsella, and interesting is I retired 1 month after my 55th birthday, after 30 years as a software engineer.
My name is Linda Garibaldi, and I spent several years working with the dolphins, and that was the best work I've ever done.
Oh,
Wow.
wonderful. Where?
Well, in Florida, in the Bahamas.
That's wonderful. That's very interesting.
My name is Diane, and I wrote my own obituary, and I've written my mother's, and I encourage my husband to write his.
Oh, good for you.
I'm on the obituary.
You're on the obituary committee? Is that what?
Trail.
Oh, on trail.
Encouraging everyone to do that.
You, sir?
My name is Doug Scriver. I guess I've visited 32 countries and have lived in Mexico several years and lived in Saigon, now known as Ho Chi Minh City, for about 2.5 years, a long time ago. That's about it.
Oh, there's wonderful. Along this table, this table?
My name is Rosa, and I'm sitting here trying to think of what could be interesting in my life. I don't know.
You can think of something. I think you have a very interesting blue sound, so there's got to be something more.
I drove over 200 miles to be here for this event.
Where do you live?
In the southeastern part of Mexico.
Candace Swatter, born and raised in Maine, lived around the world in many different places. I have 3 sisters, they're surviving, and I have a very simple service.
Back here, our lawyers.
Hi, I'm Lisa, still same, haven't changed. Interesting thing about me, this past October was the first time I got to use some of my vacation time to actually take a vacation and not use it for school or exams or tests, and I got engaged while I was on vacation.
Where did you go?
I went to Puerto Vallarta.
Oh, wonderful.
I'm Jim, and interesting, I still play competitive soccer at age 46. I probably play better now than I did in my 20s. Something about the mental aspect of the game really helps.
Back table, please.
I'm Laura Randolph, and I started and grew Mama's Minerals, a bead and rock shop here in Albuquerque.
Oh, cool.
That's my legacy. Better not fail.
My name is Arjen Oskarsdottir. I'm from Iceland. And my family can trace back all the way to 950.
Oh, fantastic.
And I was the 10-year-old in front of the TV set watching President Kennedy announce that we were going to the moon. And I was already brainwashed that because I was a girl, I could not be an astronaut. But I made a vow that wherever the mission was center, that's where I was going to be. So I was the first female NASA employee to work mission control at Johnson Space Center.
All right, let's go to the middle table. Start with the beard. That's you.
You can tell by the shirt, I'm a passionate cyclist, touring cyclist. I've toured about 100,000 miles now. I go about 4 months each year on the road. And a few years ago, I cycled around the world for a year.
And what's your name?
Larry.
Larry?
So 56 countries. Wow. That's what I do.
My name is Janice. Something interesting is I got married when I was 18 and we're still married. And it's been 51 years.
Wonderful. Congratulations. All right, this table over here by the window.
My name's Gary. I don't know what's been interesting, but I jumped out of an airplane, a perfectly good airplane. Scuba diving, I ride motorcycles for the last 65 years. I'm still alive.
Wait, and none of this is interesting. This is all just mundane and one, right?
My name is Terry. I lived in Japan for 3 years as an Air Force wife and mom. It's very interesting.
Back table, please.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I've got 2 iron butts on my motorcycle. One around Lake Michigan, 1,000 miles in 24 hours, and the other one was 50 national parks in 25 states in 1 year. And it sounds like, oh, well, that'd be easy, but when you work full time, that's not so easy. So, and I drum too.
Oh, fantastic.
My name is Leah. I'll be the third person in the room to say Iceland, since my family and I were also there at the end of June this year. Loved it so much. Can't wait to go back. And I've also jumped out of an airplane, but I stopped after 3 times. And I bought this scarf, this shawl in Pakistan in 1989, and it's kept me warm ever since.
Okay, so aside from wanting to know the room a little bit better, one of the reasons that I wanted to go around and hear more about people is because of what we normally read in a traditional obituary. And can somebody tell me what those elements are that you normally read when you look at a traditional obituary?
Well, it's, do I have a spouse, or do I have siblings? Who's alive? Who's dead? Where did I go to school?
you know, I'm a lovely person. I mean, because I've been trying to write my obit. And so I have actually been reading obits in the Albuquerque Journal now for a month. Which for me is a big deal, a month of reading obits. And they're horrible.
They are horrible, and that's why I'm here.
That's why I'm here.
They read more like extended sort of death notices, right? And just as she described, it's who did you marry, who did you leave behind, where did you live, and your birth and death date. So I'll use myself as an example, and when Jim mentioned earlier, like asked everyone in the room to raise their hand and who was married, I just got married and I don't live with my husband, and so I forgot that I was married. And I will be 45 soon, so I've been single for a very long time, right? So I'm a very untraditional woman, not married, I don't have children, I don't have any family in my area. So what would my obituary look like if it was being written in traditional terms? It would be like, oh, she's an old spinster cat lady who couldn't get a man. And that would be it, right? I mean, or that would be the undercurrent of whatever death notice somebody put out about me. So I think along with becoming less reliant on tradition in the funeral industry, obituaries have gone the same way, or they should be going the same way. That we rely less and less on these traditional model of what an obituary should look like, and start thinking outside the lines, start redefining what an obituary is and what it means to each and every one of us. So we have this idea that there's this traditional obituary that we've just spoken about. But what if I told you that your obituary doesn't even need to be written? Doesn't need to be a written piece. Many of you thinking, oh, what does that mean? How does that get into the paper? Well, as you all know, newspapers are a failing industry, unfortunately. And the cost of actually even printing that elongated death notice runs into the hundreds of dollars. I know in Detroit in particular, it starts at $500 to get into a major newspaper. Sometimes the smaller newspapers, it's less, sometimes it's more because they don't print as much and they don't have the advertisers to back up the budget. So a lot of people aren't even printing in the newspapers anymore. They're sharing on social media, they're relying on funeral homes to put up the obituary online, right? And then people can search from and so on and so forth. So that has extended the written obituary quite a bit. So now, if it's online, it can be pages, it doesn't matter, right? So it gives us more space and more room to write. But also, when we think about it, not all of us are really great at expressing ourselves in writing. I know that when my father died and I wrote what I will consider a really fantastic obituary, I've been a professional writer for almost 28 years, I couldn't imagine what that obituary would look like had my brothers written it. They're both officers in the Navy, and they're very uncreative and very traditional, and it would have been just a death notice. So when we think about things like estate planning that Jim was talking about, maybe consider too what you want things to look like and how you want to leave your legacy, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be in a written form. And before I touch on that more, can anyone tell me who is an obituary for? It's for the living, right? It's for the living. So there's nothing that says that you can't create something for people to remember you the way in which you want to be remembered, right? Or do you want a funeral director who doesn't even know you to fill in a template with some words and have it turn into this elongated death notice, right? When my father died, he didn't want a funeral and he didn't want an obituary. I gave him both because it wasn't about him at that point, it was about me. I needed those things. I needed a funeral, and I paid for it. I needed an obituary for him. And regardless of his wishes, it was for me, and it was therapeutic for me. Obviously, I'm a writer, I do it for a living. I needed to do that, I needed to get it out, right? So you have to decide, what are you going to leave behind for people who you love and people who love you? Maybe you don't even understand the impact that you have on people. Maybe at your funeral, more people will turn up than you expect, or your memorial. Maybe more people will be interested in reading about you than you expect. You know, for those of you in the room who decided that there was nothing interesting about yourselves, I encourage you to dig deeper, because there are people in your life who love you and cherish you for things that you are not even aware of. And those are the people that you're leaving an obituary for, okay? So I cannot teach you in basically the 45 minutes that we have how to write an obituary. I can't teach you how to write. I've been doing this for 28 years. I've been writing, professionally. I've been writing my whole life. I knew I wanted to be a writer before I even went to kindergarten. I told my family, I'm going to be a writer. It's what I read books all the time. It's all I want to do. I'm going to be a writer. So all of you have certain gifts. I would encourage you to create an obituary based on who you really are. Some of you, aside from what you've told me, may have other talents, other hobbies that lend themselves to an obituary. You spoke about your grandmother's recipes. Why can't your obituary or your grandmother's obituary be that collection of recipes, right? What if people showed up at the memorial and for the eulogy you said, remember all the times you came over to the house, or remember all the things that Grandma baked for you, that she fed you, the love that she created, that she put into these meals. Here, this is for you, and include some of her recipes as her obituary, because this is how she showed her love. If that's the most important thing that you want from her, then her cooking has to have some sort of very profound meaning in your relationship with her and in your family. So if that's something that's so valued, maybe that becomes her obituary, her favorite recipe or a collection of her recipes, right? Because that's how she expressed herself. So I would encourage you to think about, how do I best express myself? I write a lot of letters to friends. I've written an obituary for myself. But instead, what I would like to do is have a lot of letters mailed upon my death to the people who I love, and even people who have just remotely impacted me, so that they'll know what place they had in my life and in shaping my life. I don't care about my list of accomplishments. I don't care about awards. I don't care about degrees. I don't care about any of that. I want the people who affected me in life to know how much I love them and how much I appreciated them when they passed away. And oftentimes, these are the things that we should be doing on a daily basis, right? We should be telling people. And yesterday, when I spoke about this in Santa Fe, I told Gail how much her support has affected me in my business, in my growing of this particular business. And she has been so wonderful since the very first day I met her, which was 2 months after I created my company. So I had never told her that, and why didn't I? So I'm announcing it again.
I'm so glad you did.
And so, these are the things that we should be doing on a daily basis. So I would encourage you not to think about your obituary as a written piece, because oftentimes, for a lot of people, that can be daunting. You're not a writer. You're sitting there with a blank page. You're like, how do I make this interesting? I can't tell you how to make it interesting. I can read what you've written, and I can critique it and tell you that it's shit. But I can't tell you how to make it spectacular, right? I can write it for you, and it will be spectacular. Writing is my thing. This is what I do. This is how I express myself. And all of you express yourself in ways that I can't do. If I tried to do what some of you did, if I tried to be a lawyer, oh my God, you'd be like, Petra, what are you, like, you can't say that, you know, you can't talk with clients like this, you can't, right? I would be horrible at it. I would be horrible at NASA. That's all magic to me. I don't even know how that, I don't even know how radio works, I'll be honest with you. Like, I just don't get things like that. My mind works differently. So all of you are very, very good at the things that interest you the most. And that's what I would encourage you to provide people that kind of obituary. Does anyone in here paint or do any sort of art, ceramics, beading, quilting, sewing, right? What do you do?
Oh, I like to make cards.
You like to make cards, right? So that's something that you could leave behind, right? Like that could be your obituary. Right? It doesn't. Yeah. Why not?
Right.
And that's what you love. That's the essential you, right? That's why you're doing it, to express yourself in some sort of way. You're manifesting yourself in those cards. So why not do that for your obituary? Right? Not all of you are writers. Some of you are. I mean, this woman sitting right in front of me who's written all of your families, and your written work would probably be fantastic. But not all of you can do that. And I can't tell you how to do that. I can't tell you how to stare at a blank page and write a really compelling opening paragraph. What I can tell you to do is to leave this world honestly and to do that thing which you do so well and make that your legacy. Right? So redefine this idea of an obituary. So what I've created here is this, a few pages. I've got a zillion questions on here. It's mostly for you to peruse later. But I'll go through some of this with you and tell you a little bit as I see it. And when I speak about honesty, I think that the very best obituaries that I have written are the ones that don't only detail a person's accomplishments and their successes and all of the wonders that they've provided, but that also include some of the more negative aspects of that person's life, because that's who they were, right? And I will say this, my father was an alcoholic. He was an alcoholic almost his entire life from age 13 until his death at age 60. He was a highly, highly functioning alcoholic, so most people would not even ever know upon meeting him that he was always inebriated. In his obituary, the first line was, after being diagnosed with brain cancer and given 6 weeks to live, Fred Orloff decided to spend the rest of his life sitting on his kitchen stool, staring out the window, drinking vodka, smoking basic cigarettes, and eating pizza and White Castle hamburgers. That's exactly what he did, right? I mean, that was my father. And then I proceeded to go through this really, it wasn't chronological, but story about my father's life and the children that he raised and the pets that he had. He refused to call his pets, he's such a formal man, he refused to call his pets by their name. So he had Pooh, a kitty named Pooh and a kitty named Shadow. But they became Mr. Pooh and Mr. Shadow, right? You weren't allowed to say, hey Pooh, no, it's Mr. Pooh. Like, he was a very formal guy. If your name was Tim, he'd call you Timothy, right? Regardless if that's what you wanted to go by or not. So some of these little amusements I added in, right? And my father also, upon his death, didn't want any money donated to any sort of foundation because, as he told me, they are all full of shit. So that was the last line of his obituary, right? Where normally you would put, oh, please, to honor, Bob's memory, please donate to the American Cancer Society. I said, please, to honor Fred's memory, don't donate anything because he thinks all, charitable organizations are full of shit. And they printed this in the newspaper, without editing, which I requested. And people loved it because people are human. You're all human. We try to be the best people we can be, most of us, but we still fail. We fail every day, right? I know that I failed several times today, as I told this young man, right? But we like to see how other people also fail because it gives us encouragement that we're not alone, right? I mean, that we're not always perfect. So as you read through these questions, I think that the process of writing your obituary should be more taking stock of your life and taking stock of the people in your life, right? That's the process. It's not always what comes out of it, but take stock. So, question number 1 here. Who has been the most important person in your life and why? So, for me, I would say this is my mother. My mother has always been the most important person in my life because she's always supported me. But not only supported, but my mother is German. She's a German immigrant, so she has vehemently supported me in a very overbearing, scary German manner. Right? So she, and Gail has met my mom actually because she comes to all these conventions and she stands in the booth with me and you better pick up one of my daughter's pamphlets. Here, just thrusting information upon people, and she's very German about it, and everyone's getting stuff, and you, come here, talk to my daughter now. You know, and I love it. I mean, my mother, it's a frightening thing. My friends never wanted to come to my house when I was little because my mother scared them, because she's German. But that's just how she is. She's just very efficient. There's no mixed words. Everything is very direct. And it works in our relationship. She's been a wonderful friend in my life. So the most important person. And I tell her this on a daily basis. On the ride up to Santa Fe yesterday to speak, I spoke with her the entire way. And on the ride down, I spoke with her and I told her exactly what I told everyone else. You are the most important person in my life. And I think that part of preparing for our end of life is to take stock and do these sorts of things. Because you may not get the chance. Question number 2 here. What was the happiest moment of your life? And the saddest. The happiest moment in my life was also the saddest. So I want you to consider this too. The happiest moment when my dad was given 6 weeks to live. And why was that the happiest moment in my life? Because my father, who's always, very emotionally and physically distant in life, didn't like to be touched, didn't like to give hugs, didn't actually tell me that he loved me until I was like 25, even though I knew he did. All of a sudden, when he was given 6 weeks to live, he needed me. He let me bathe him. He let me comb his hair. When he had seizures, I got to hold him. I got to comfort him. He wanted me to hold him while he died. It was the biggest gift I could have ever been given. And those 6 weeks with my father were the 6 happiest weeks of my life because I got to do things for my dad that I never thought that I would be able to do, that he had never given me the opportunity to do until he took stock of his life and said, yeah, maybe in these 6 weeks I should ask my daughter to come closer, to be closer to me. And it was a wonderful time. So even the worst times, I think, can add something very dramatic to our lives and to our legacy, right? I'm very grateful for those 6 weeks. Also, in taking stock of your life, and the reason I think people should start working on their obituaries, their legacy, right away, is because we don't know when we're going to die, right? This has been mentioned several times today. We don't have a crystal ball. We don't know when we're going to die. When I was 29, a year after my father died, I was walking across, and you guys just heard this story, I was walking across a crosswalk in my town, and it was a red light, and so I had right away, and I started walking across the crosswalk, and a semi-truck ran the red light, and at 40 miles an hour hit me, and I flew through the air, and I hit a telephone pole, and then I just sort of rolled on the ground, and I spun out, and I lived. But I could have very easily died, very easily died. And I hadn't done any preparation at all. I hadn't told people how much I loved them, how much I appreciated them. I don't know if I told my mother how meaningful she was to me. I certainly hadn't told any of my friends who had helped me through my father's death how much that meant to me. I hadn't taken the kind of stock that I needed to. And in preparing for your death, all of the stuff that we've discussed today, including the financial planning and the creating of a trust, and I know how important that is. I am legal guardian and power of attorney and trustee for an elderly gentleman who's 86 years old, and that is really important to get your stuff in line, absolutely. But emotionally, you should prepare yourself and others as well. You should give others a gift, right? And that gift is your legacy, no matter how you choose to create it. So think of your obituary as a gift that you're leaving for people behind you. Are you going to compile tiny cards? Are you going to compile a book of recipes? Are you going to assemble a collage of photographs that are meaningful to you? And maybe write a little caption underneath why this is so important to you, what this photograph meant, this moment in time, what it meant to you. Are you going to write something? Are you going to do something else that's visual and creative, a piece of art? Are you going to make quilts? Are you going to start, I'm not a baker, so I don't know, but are you going to start a little thing of bread for people, right? I don't know what that's called.
Starter card.
Yeah, starter. Right, like those sorts of things you can do. And I would advise you to start on it now, because clearing yourself emotionally is just as important as preparing yourself, to protect your families financially and so on and so forth. It's great. Leave your sons and daughters and dogs and cats all sorts of money, right? And your wealth, and leave them that car they've always liked, or that really great motorcycle that you have, or your drum set, or whatever it is. And that's great. But also give people something of yourself, something emotional, because they need that after you die. They need that. They need that gift from you, right? We've all experienced death here. Wouldn't it have been wonderful had we been given that gift? I had that gift with my father. I knew what he was doing when he let me in and let me hold him and touch him and kiss him and baby him, right? I knew that was a gift, but we don't all get that. So I would say start preparing for that now and let that be your legacy. And just, as you look through these pages, these are just guidelines for you to think about things. Just guidelines. And you can sketch out little answers and then decide how you're going to compile it. People write chronologically, or just write about things that are, just important moments in time, if that's how you want to go about it. But again, I would encourage you to do what you do best, because that's going to have more of an emotional impact than any kind of piece of writing that you can do, unless you're good at writing, or unless you feel comfortable with writing. Some of the best obituaries / eulogies I've ever written. One was for a cousin of mine, who was also my godfather. I hadn't spoken to his children in about 20 years, not for any other reason, but time had passed. We moved away from one another, and I just hadn't had much contact. They, upon his death, contacted me and asked me not only to write the eulogy, but to deliver it. And their father was my father's best friend. So it was a lovely gesture. But just like my dad, he liked to drink. He liked ladies. He loved to gamble. He loved to go, he was a character, just like my father, an absolute character. And a liar. He just lied about everything, could not stop lying, just tall tales left and right, So I remember writing the obituary, and I knew him pretty well, and I got some details from the family. And then I contacted my cousins, and I hope this is okay to say, Gail. I contacted my cousins and I said, is it right? I know that we're going to be in a funeral home, and I know it's a eulogy, but is it okay? Could I possibly, would you terribly mind if I use the word titties in this eulogy? And they're like, no, go ahead. We love the titties. Go ahead. So I gave this eulogy, and I think it was completely unexpected, but people were laughing, people were crying. I talked about, this man loves strippers. He loved to go to strip clubs. He loved his lap dances. He loved the titties. And people just went wild. And after the funeral, there was a wake at a local restaurant, and I felt terrible for my cousins, but everyone wanted to talk to me. They were like, oh my God, how did you write that? What made you think that you could, it was so, because people loved to remember you as you were. They don't want a death notice. They don't want flowery, poetic stuff. They want you. That's why they're there. That's why they're a part of your life, because they love you and they want you. So my suggestion is give them you. Give them all of the good and all of the bads and all of the questionable strip club nonsense, because that makes you you. And they love you because you are human. They love you for your failures. They love you for your successes. And you need to give people you. That's all they want. After you're gone, they're grieving you, they're missing you. They want you. Work on giving them you, even if it takes you years. It's something, if you go through these questions, you can really check off some really important emotional moments in your life. I had a conversation with my mother not too long ago, and we were talking about when she first immigrated from Germany, and it was in the 60s, mid-60s, and she came to Detroit, and I don't know how many of you know Detroit's history at that time, but it was a time of tumult, huge racial divide in the city, which eventually led up to some pretty severe race riots, which changed the city's landscape forever, up until this day. My mother came over from Germany. She was a nanny, and I found out, just by asking her a couple questions, I don't know what I asked her, something about, what were your hobbies when you first came over from Germany? What were you thinking? She's like, oh, I had a boyfriend. I was like, what are you talking about? And this is just, my mother is so sweet, and she's just a good girl, and she waited for marriage with my father, and that was always something she impressed upon me, and she's just a very straight-laced and very moral woman. And I was like, what do you mean you had a boyfriend? I didn't even know that you were seeing people before Dad. She's like, oh no, I had a man. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she proceeded to tell me how she would sneak out of the house that she was a nanny at to meet this gentleman that she was seeing at the Holiday Inn coffee shop who happened to be African American. I was like, what were you doing? It was Detroit, it was like 1965. Did you ever get any pushback? Were you, how did that happen? Did you guys ever talk about it? She was like, oh no, we were too busy having fun and we were laughing. We would go to ball games on the weekends, and I'd lie and say I was going shopping. And then I did, and I found out she had this whole other life that I had no idea that she had. And I think my mother, too, also being an immigrant, had no idea of the race relations going on, so it never occurred to her that this might be a relationship that would be addressed publicly in a negative manner, you know? And it was just shocking to me. And I only found this stuff out about my mom because I asked a couple questions that were on this sheet. I would never have known. And the best part, I think, to this particular story is I said, well, I was like, how good looking was this gentleman? She's like, oh, I could have married him if we hadn't moved away, because they moved to another area of Detroit. I was like, really? She's like, oh, he was like Denzel. And I was like, first of all, I only say Denzel Washington when I refer to that particular actor. I never just call him Denzel, and I surely don't say Denzel. It was just shocking to hear this from my mother, but opened a really wonderful window into her world. And I never would have known any of that had I not asked her some questions, had I not spoken to her. I know it's hard. I know all of you have relationships in your life that need mending, that are difficult obstacles, that are hard to come by, that relationships that might still be problematic and troublesome. I would say clear it all out, do the emotional work to get past it, and go out of this world honestly. Just like you want to go out of this world with all of your finances in order, go out with all of your emotional stuff in order. And leave a gift for the people who love you, who need you, who respect you. And every single one of you. There are people in this room right now who love you that you don't even know about. There are people in this room right now who regret the way that they've treated you, but you'll never hear about. There are people in this room, you may have people that respect you, admire you, and whose lives you've influenced so deeply, who are never going to tell you that. But imagine the gift if you only knew such things, right? Imagine how you would feel if someone you only know marginally said, you know what, you've been the biggest influence on my life. Or an ex who said, the way that I treated you, the way that I spoke to you, you don't deserve that. It's the biggest regret that I've ever had. I love you, and I'll always love you. I mean, these are the things that I think that working on one's obituary should be addressed. Go out of this world honestly and leave these people a gift. Because there are people who are going to mourn you that you don't even know about, who are going to miss you and want you and crave you when you are gone. Leave them a gift. Leave them part of you. And with that, I'll take any questions that anyone has.